Marco Bezzecchi just did something nobody else in MotoGP history has had the guts to do at Mugello. And the moment it happened, every single person watching knew exactly who taught him how to be that kind of rider. May 31st, 2026. Mugello, the Italian Grand Prix. 178,723 people packed into those Tuscan hills, draped in yellow flags, chanting his name before the lights even went out. The atmosphere alone would have broken lesser riders, but Bezzecchi, he fed off every single decibel. What do you do when you've just stolen the biggest race of the year from Ducati on their centenary, their anniversary, their home circuit, their moment to celebrate 100 years of the brand that has dominated MotoGP for the better part of a decade? You do what Marco Bezzecchi does. You bury them on their own track. Pure, unfiltered Italian fire. The weekend started with a statement that shook the entire paddock. Bezzecchi put his Aprilia on pole position with a lap of 1 minute 43.921 seconds. The first ever sub 1 foot 44 lap ever recorded on a motorcycle at Mugello. In the history of that circuit, through every generation of machine, no rider had ever done what Bezzecchi did on Saturday. And that was before the race even started. When the lights went out, Ducati had everything to prove. Francesco Bagnaia was desperate. Jorge Martin, Bezzecchi's own teammate, was hunting him down. The pressure inside that Aprilia garage sat at levels most teams never experience. And across 23 laps of one of the most demanding circuits in the world, Bezzecchi managed every threat, controlled every gap, and crossed the line first. Aprilia's first MotoGP win at Mugello. Ever. That result didn't just hurt Ducati. It ripped through their centenary party like a thunderstorm through a parade.
So here's the question that genuinely matters. Would you have the guts to celebrate right in front of 178,000 screaming MotoGP fans after the biggest win of your life? Because Marco Bezzecchi didn't even pause to share that moment with them. Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you want more moments like this one, hit subscribe, because the 2026 season is only getting started. But the race result? That's only half the story. Valentino Rossi won 9 World Championships. 9. He is the reason MotoGP sells out Mugello every single year. The man turned this circuit into a cathedral and the fans into believers. After he retired at Valencia in November 2021, Rossi celebrated by doing a stage dive inside his garage, throwing himself into the arms of his team. And afterward, when journalists asked him about Mugello specifically, Rossi admitted something that told you everything about how he saw that crowd. He said it had always been his dream to dive into the Mugello fans like Jim Morrison at a rock concert. But he was always too afraid. Too afraid the fans would grab him and simply never let him go. Think about that. 9 World Championships, 30 years of motorcycle racing, the most celebrated former rider in the sport's history. Bezzecchi did not blink. The moment his Aprilia crossed the finish line, something ignited in that crowd that you can feel through a camera lens. His in-lap became a lap of honor for 178,000 people who hadn't seen an Italian rider win at home like this in years. He pulled up to the pit lane wall. He climbed up onto it. No helmet, no script, no plan. He started hurling his racing gloves into the stands, and the crowd went berserk. The chants started building. Nudo! Nudo! Thousands of people screaming at him to throw everything. And he did. Piece by piece, gear flying into the crowd, the noise climbing with every single item. Then he jumped. Gone. Into the crowd. Marco Bezzecchi, the man who just set the fastest lap ever recorded at Mugello, who just handed Aprilia their greatest Italian Grand Prix result in the modern era, who just crushed Ducati's centenary dreams, celebrated on the straight as thousands of Italian fans flooded the track to share in the historic moment. Who does that? Seriously, who in 2026 MotoGP looks at an ocean of screaming humans and decides the right move is to dive in head first? A rider with Rossi's competitive spirit. That's who. That's who. Because this is what separates Bezzecchi from so many others on the grid right now. The speed is obvious, the pole position proved that. The racecraft is beyond question. But racing fast gets you results on a scoreboard. It doesn't get you a moment. It doesn't get you the kind of story that people tell their kids about 20 years from now. Rossi understood this better than anyone who ever sat on a motorcycle. Winning wasn't enough. The feeling around the win, the theater, the connection with the fans, that was the whole point. Bezzecchi absorbed that lesson completely, and on May 31st, 2026, the entire MotoGP world watched him graduate. Rossi built the VR46 Academy with exactly this philosophy running through it. Not just developing fast riders, but developing riders who understand what the sport means to the people watching it. Bezzecchi came through that system. He absorbed not just Rossi's technical approach to riding, but his understanding of what a crowd needs from a champion. Rossi always argued, the fans are part of the show. At Mugello in 2026, Bezzecchi made the fans the show. Literally. The context makes this hit even harder. This was the 10th victory of Bezzecchi's top-class career, but the where matters more than the number itself. Mugello. In front of Italian fans who grew up watching Rossi make this exact circuit sacred. On a day when Ducati, the Italian brand with everything to celebrate, missed out on the win but still took a podium spot. Bezzecchi didn't just win a race. He absorbed the emotional weight of an entire nation's expectations and turned it into a crowd surf nobody will ever forget. Can you picture it? Standing there on that pit wall, engines still cooling, the crowd surging below you. 178,000 people screaming your name. Most riders wave, maybe some cry. The really brave ones do a burnout. Bezzecchi looked at that wall, looked at that crowd, and chose the beautiful, completely unhinged option that only comes from someone who genuinely loves this sport and genuinely loves these people. A rider with the spirit of Rossi. That's who. And you know what the crowd screamed back? They didn't just cheer. They caught him. They carried him. They passed him back and forth down that straight like he was one of their own. Because in every way that matters at Mugello, he is. This is Italian motorcycle racing at its most raw. No PR team signed off on this. No sponsor briefing covered the crowd surfing protocol. This was a rider and 178,000 fans sharing one moment that nobody planned and nobody could have designed from a boardroom. That's the difference between a champion and a legend. One gets you a trophy, the other gets you a permanent place in the culture of a sport. The sport needed this. After years of Ducati dominance, after seasons where results felt increasingly predictable, after a stretch where tire management dominated conversations more than passion and character, Bezzecchi handed MotoGP back something it had been quietly missing since a certain number 46 walked away from the grid in 2021. That spark, that sense that anything can happen, and that the people racing these machines feel things as deeply as the people watching them. That electricity. Nobody does this. Nobody climbs a pit wall after winning Mugello and dives into the crowd. Except now, somebody did. And the bar sits there for every rider who comes after him. The real measure of what Bezzecchi built at Mugello in 2026 won't come from the championship standings. It won't come from the lap records, though that 143.921 will sit in the history books permanently.
The measure comes from how riders like Valentino Rossi traditionally connected with the fans at Mugello, without risking extreme stunts. Rossi dreamed of getting closer to the fans, but he never stated that fear of jumping off a wall stopped him. His student? No hesitation, no fear. Full send. That is what legacy looks like when it passes from one generation to the next. Not inherited, not copied, lived. He celebrated passionately with his team and interacted with the fans from the podium rather than jumping into the crowd. And because somewhere in his racing soul, the same fire that made Valentino Rossi the greatest showman this sport has ever produced burns just as hot. The crowd caught him at Mugello. The sport caught him too. And if you were watching from anywhere in the world on May 31st, 2026, you felt it. That thing that makes you forget about lap times and championship points and just remember why you fell in love with motorcycle racing in the first place.